I'll be introducing Human Nguyen, who is the author of This Way to the Sugar and Not Here. He's also the winner of the Tom Gunn Award for Gay Poetry. Both of his collections of poetry were also finalists for a Minnesota Book Award at a Lambda Literary Award and a Lambda Literary Award, I'm sorry. In 2019, he was awarded the Wallace Stegner Fellowship from Stanford University. He is also 2018 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellow, 2018 McKnight Writing Fellow, Kundiman Fellow, a 2017 National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow, the recipient of the Minnesota Emerging Writers Grant and an Artist Initiative Grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board. He's also a poetry editor for Muzzle Magazine. His work has also appeared or is coming forth in Poetry Magazine, The New York Times, Best American Poetry, the Academy of American Poets, BuzzFeed, and elsewhere. He lives in Oakland and is a graduate from the MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson College. So welcome, Hugh, and I'm going to let you take over.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so sorry for being late. Thank y'all for sticking around, and I appreciate y'all being here and listening. I am gonna just jump right in and oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
cool,
Yeah,
cool,
we
cool.
can
Thank
hear
you.
you.
Yeah, I am just gonna jump in and start reading poems. So I and I'll talk to y'all in between poems. I'm not very good at banter, but yeah, I feel like having some kind of um, usually poetry readings these days through Zoom or virtual is kind of my only social interaction I get, um, and so I try to milk it for just try to restore that battery. As soon as I became proficient in English, my mother started asking me to translate the morning news to her. She wanted to participate with the world. Some things were easy. I could explain house fires. I could explain high speed chases. I could even stumble my way through political scandals. But I remember as a child, I had to learn to study the atrocities of the world, to not only interpret them into language, but some kind of logic. 9/11 happened when I was 10. Columbine when I was 8. Matthew Shepard was murdered when I was 7. Even now, I can still hear my mom saying, Dysau, Dysau, who? Who would do that? Who could do that? Why? Why would they do that? Why would they do that to that boy? Gay? Gay? What does that mean? Oh, okay. It's important to mention the only time my mother speaks in English is when I make her speak in a poem. So she says, get out, says, leave, but it's me, my voice that slams the door. The only way out is through the opening of her mouth. The only way towards salvation is forgiveness, the aunts would say, licking their thumbs to cross their foreheads. Sure, the only mask I own is humming on my face. I want to study the mechanics of leaving. Go, go, go so I can see, slow so I can watch everything fade to water. I think it was Sappho who said, I long and seek after. But of course, that's not what she said. Not exactly. If things happen the way they're supposed to, my mother will die before me. My mother, who by then will love me, will die. My mother, who by then will hopefully be happy, will walk without pain from this life into the next, and I, her only son, her writer son, will stay to translate her life into English. Any adjective can be true if you cry hard enough. I can lie and say I haven't written the poem, haven't buried her over and over at my desk, haven't described the ash of her body. I throw a fistful of sand in the air and pretend to weep. I write the poem. I fill my lungs with English. I numb her skin with English. I English the light she walks into. I kill her just to raise her from the dead. I anticipate this grief by exhausting it with music. I pry open the casket. I make her twirl in the center. Changeling. Standing in front of a mirror, my mother tells me she is ugly, says the medication is making her fat. I laugh and walk her back to bed. My mother tells me she is ugly in the same voice she used to say, "No woman could love you." And I watch her pull at her body, and it is mine, my heavy breasts, my disappointing shape. She asks for a bowl of plain broth, and it becomes the cup of vinegar she would pour down my throat every day after school. I would kneel before her. I would remove my clothes and ask her to mark the progress. It's important that I mention I truly wanted to be beautiful for her. In my dreams, I am thin, and if not thin, something better. I tell my mother she is still beautiful, and she laughs. The room fills with flies. They gather in the shape of a small boy. They lead her back to the mirror, but my reflection is still there. I promise that they're not all bummers. Um, Actually, I'll read this one. Uh, so in I graduated high school in 2009, and 2 years now, 2 years ago now, was my 10-year high school reunion, and I unfortunately did not. Uh, Fortunately, I couldn't attend. But I did imagine a speech I would give, and it's I so this poem came out of a prompt of like what could I say to the people who knew me when I was young, um, if I could. And also I'm a Gemini, and so I really kind of let uh, let the Gemini spirit kind of take over when writing this poem. It's true, I can hold a grudge better than I can a conversation. Sure, you think the weather is nice, but I can't really tell. All I know is in the third grade, after it rained, Kimberly Nelson told me I smelled like a potato, and so no, I don't really care what your baby looks like. And of course, I want to be happy for you and your new haircut. But how can I when in 2003, Tyler Garvey told the class I had lice when it was actually just really bad dandruff, and nobody would come near me except Johnny Connors, who eventually told the boys I was cool after I went over to his house to watch Tomb Raider, but his father made us watch porn instead, and I stayed quiet the whole time, which is what you're supposed to do when you watch porn with other boys. No, you can't smile. You can't look away. You can't say stupid shit like, what are they doing with that baseball bat? You're supposed to know what they're doing with that baseball bat. And if you don't, the last thing you should do is ask questions. It's not a classroom. There's only one rule in a circle jerk, and that's don't be noticed. And I think that's our problem. We always pretend we know what we're doing when we don't. When someone passes out at a party, we give them water and turn up the music. When someone passes away, we count the days until summer. Say it's not our fault that he hung himself. Say something must have been happening at home. We point our red hands away from our throats, avoid his parents at the grocery store, dedicate a page to him in the yearbook, cling to his death like the arm of a letterman. I'm sorry, you did nothing wrong. I'm just saying you should talk to someone else because I don't know what I'm doing here, and I don't know how long I will stay. I grew up in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and I think like everyone, you kind of long to escape from where you came from, but for a while I didn't think it was possible for me. I felt like I was gonna be there forever, and I would get these opportunities to leave town occasionally, and so I wrote this poem about the little tiny escapes I got to have, um, even though it felt like it was inevitable that I would return. This poem is called Outbound. Past the congested interstate, past the long lines outside the Dorothy Day Center, past the cheering bleachers, the steam rising from the coach's face, the fathers straining in prayer, past the rusting letters on the marquee, the dim lights along Main Street, the couples who will fuck during the movie and the couples who won't, past the frozen orchard, the defaced statue of a saint, a dog chews thin the leather cord around his neck. The opposite of hunger is not satisfaction, it is birth. It is what makes a man chisel a face into stone. It is what drives the body to lay in the fresh snow. It is what quiets the world when she pulls you in close. It is the winning pass. The crowd too busy counting down to notice. The world puts its mouth on you and you don't say a thing. The world digs a hole in your yard and it's up to you to fill it. Up to you to find something useful to do with your sadness strange. The yellow beetle dried between the pages of the dictionary, staining the page with its flattened body, its outline a dirty halo circling the word pleased. Please. You've circled the same 2 blocks in search for a place to park. Circled a yard howling a name that won't respond, but you still think you know enough to call that enough. The boat smacks against the dock it's tied to. Your mother fixes your father's tie before closing the casket. Everyone you loved refused to die in this town before they died in this town. The woman beside you on the plane wants to know where you're going. This poem is, I wrote this after a prompt, uh, and the prompt was to think about your earliest act of violence. Um, and I was thinking of this time that well, I guess I'll read the poem and y'all will figure it out. Lucky. I pushed him off the cliff. I was 3, he was 10, he was my cousin. The other children screamed. Then our parents screamed and ran in all different directions. They asked me why I did it. My reason wasn't good enough, so they kept on asking. I remember feeling embarrassed. I sat on the ground and pulled at the grass. They made me look them in the eyes. They grabbed my face. They kept looking at it, turning it back and forth in the light. I cried, they let go. I said I was sorry. I meant it. I was surprised they didn't beat me. At home, they watched me watch television. They put a hot towel on my face and placed me in a bath. They brought me to his bedside. They wanted to make it a lesson. For years, I've been trying to be clear about what I am capable of. I remember looking down at the body. I remember him staring back up, but that can't be true. I got ice cream at the hospital cafeteria. The doctor said he was lucky. I was lucky that he was lucky. The ice cream had sprinkles. I ate it in front of him. My mother and I don't have dinner table conversations out of courtesy. We don't want to remind each other of our accents, her voice, a Vietnamese lullaby sung to an empty bed, the taste of her hometown still kicking in the back of her teeth. My voice is bleach. My voice has no history. My voice is the ringing of an empty picture frame, the frequency of a TV turned off. My birth name is Hugh Wing, but today all my friends call me Huey. But Hugh is sitting in preschool trying to say the word orange, to say the word bathroom, to say home, to say friend, and today I'm forgetting how to say the simple things to my mother. The words that linger in my periphery. I am only fluent in apologies. Sometimes when I watch home movies, I don't even understand myself. My childhood is a foreign film. All of my memories have been dubbed in English. My mother's favorite television shows are all 90s sitcoms, the ones that have laugh tracks, the pre recorded emotion to cue her when to smile. In the first grade, I mastered my tongue. I cleaned my speech, and during parent teacher conferences, the teacher was surprised that my mother was Asian. She just assumed I was adopted. She assumed that this voice was the same one I started out with. And she holds a pair of chopsticks. A friend asks me why I am using a fork. I tell her it's much easier. She says in the same octave as my grandmother, but this is so much cooler. I am just the clip art. I'm the poster boy of whitewash. My skin has been burning easier these days. My voice box is shrinking. I have rinsed it out too many times. My house is a silent film. My house is infested with subtitles. That's all. That is all. I have nothing else to say. I wrote, I mean, for a long time, for a long time, I thought I was like the first queer person in my family to come out because I felt so alone in the process. Um, and but that's I realize now that is silly of me because queer people have existed forever, and um, and then I remember actually my uncle who passed away when I was really young, and nobody in my family really talks about him, and I learned that he lived his life as a gay man, and I wrote this elegy for him. It's called Elegy for the First. Our family never understood why you never married, why you didn't have children. Mother going on and on about her friends at bingo who could have used a man like you around the house. I ask her about the man sitting in the front row. The roommate, she says. Instead of the diagnosis, instead of explaining how or why, isn't it enough to say no more? Who has time for better dreams than these? Pray for a miracle or a good night's sleep, won't you? Pray for the right ghost to walk you to the end of each season. Uncle, a story before you sleep. Here, a child dressed in dust. This time you wait for him before you leave. Here, another. Once I ran face first into a mirror because I didn't recognize my reflection, because I didn't see a reflection at all. I feel each shard opening me. as I walk towards you and that man standing beside your open casket. He is there in every photograph of you smiling. I want to kiss him. I want to take him into me, soften his grief with my heat, and inherit any pulse you might have left behind. I'm sorry for your loss, I say, or he says, or neither of us say. I'm not sure. I have so many questions. I trace your mouth counterclockwise, but you do not answer. I'm gonna write. Sorry, I have so many papers around my desk. Here we go. Portrait with self-portrait. Under the bathroom lights, I mastered the art of the perfect selfie. Angle my face so it looks like my face, but not too much like my face. In this photo, I could be on a beach, in a museum, volunteering at a nursing home. You never guessed by looking. I was at 7-Eleven, ankle deep in toilet water. There are a few different strategies when it comes to hookup apps. Some people set the bar low, attempting to look worse in their photos, so when you show up at their apartment, you're pleasantly surprised at the absence of a ponytail. Some people go to extremes to alter the way they look, smoothing their skin into a blur of pixels. Some men use their abs or hooked fish as the focal point. Some men remove their face completely, decapitate themselves. Rows and rows of headless torsos fill my screen. Even in the gallery of the beheaded, you'll find mouths to fill. Tonight, when a faceless man messages me, I recognize him first by his hands, his wedding band. Remember the flat of his palm against my mouth, even when I made no sound. When I don't respond to his message, he reveals his face. Remember me? As if I couldn't hear the head beneath the cloche platter, still saying I was lucky, saying I should be grateful he stayed when he saw me. Remember me? This portrait, the same one he used before, the kind a man would take not to make himself feel handsome or beautiful, but to prove he was important, the kind of portrait he imagined being carved into a coin one day. I learned early that a photograph could be used as currency. A man holds up the baby photo in his wallet, and the gunman redirects his aim. Entire political careers end between the white borders of a Polaroid. Al Franken resigns. Chris Lee resigns. The Princess of Wales died in the back of a Mercedes trying to escape the aperture. When I was younger, my mother would fan out a collage of women and ask me to choose a bride. I didn't. Instead, I tried to become them, drape myself in the white of the exposure. In her wedding photos, my father grips my mother's face and forces her to smile. In Galveston, Texas, Leslie Ray Charping's children write, "Evil does in fact die," in his obituary. Does it? Or does evil cast its light, yes, light, on everything it touches, imprinting itself inside us, an image we trace into the dark? Some men don't care about being missed. Some men only want to be remembered. Some men stare at their reflection and dare it to stay. I am going to, so I am, normally, it's hard to tell now because of the pandemic, but normally I'm an introvert. And I used to do this thing where I would like force myself to go to a party in order to justify not going to any parties for like a whole season. So it'd be like my one social event for the calendar. And I wrote a poem about attending a party even though I didn't want to, um, just so I can have an excuse later to not attend any more parties. To justify another month of solitude, I tell myself, despite my instincts to stay inside, it'll be good to exhaust myself of the world. Outside the yellow house on Portland Avenue, I kick the slush from my boots, ascending the empty porch. Even if I'm wrong, and the light beyond the door is a light to nowhere, I can still say I tried, at least for a moment, to live outside the warm parameters of my loneliness. I can't stop thinking of the old man who'd salt and shovel his walk clean and precise every morning, and how the neighbors, growing suspicious of the jagged terrain of his driveway, discovered weeks later he'd passed away in his sleep. But here is a world where the people I love gather in small rooms with not enough chairs to hold us. How lucky I am to be missed by those who have run out of ways to hold me. And isn't that what I always wanted? To keep something perfect long enough for everyone to notice when I'm gone. Thank you. I like the hand emojis that come out of nowhere. They're so surprising. Like I said, I'm a Gemini, and do any of you remember the time when they discovered like a new planet or something, and everybody's like horoscope shifted over, and everyone was freaking out about if their Sagittarius tattoo was actually still applicable to them. Um, I have four cousins who've gotten my grandmother's birthday tattooed on their shoulders. Uh, I do not have the heart to tell them that they got it wrong. Uh, that December 31st, 1918 was just a date the government assigned her when she came to America. My grandmother did not know her birthday. My grandmother did not know when her story began. My grandmother, who only went back to Vietnam to put fresh flowers on graves. My grandmother, who knew hunger best, rationed between 10 siblings. When I say hunger, I mean the lack of more. If I complain about growing up lonely as an only child, I'm also complaining about a full stomach and a mouth that has stopped watering. My grandmother had 6 brothers and 4 sisters, but none of the girls were given names, only numbers. My grandmother's name is Bay, which in English is a pretty name, but when translated back to Vietnamese, it means 7. My grandmother's name is 7. 1. My grandmother's memory went before she did. At first, it was just an orchestra of faucets hissing until morning, and then it was the smoke alarms, and then it was the night she was found wandering along the highway. When asked where she was going, she just said, home. 2. Once, when I was younger, I held a litter of newborn bunnies. I named each one. When I returned them to their cage, I watched their mother kill and eat each one because they gave off some strange scent because they smelled like me. 3. Towards the end, when my grandmother became no longer a woman with sun in her skin, when the hospital lights stripped her of all her color, when she became no longer a woman who sang lullabies that harmonized to explosions, instead had her breath coiled into a cacophony of tubes, she kept on calling out for home. Home. I still don't know which home she meant. For the last time I went to Vietnam, I half expected the ground to open and swallow me whole. I know I am lucky to have been loved, even though I smell nothing like gunpowder. 5, because I fled a house that was not on fire. I belong nowhere near the ocean. Because I know nothing of war, I will not use metaphors that do not belong to me. My parents' divorce is not a war. My grief is not a war. My sadness does not shrapnel. My sadness does not flatten an entire village. Sadness is not a war. War is war. Sick somewhere, not here. There is a house that does not look like a body. Somewhere, not here, my grandmother recognizes my scent as not her own and gouges out my eyes. 7. I was born once. I was held and given a name once. And how many times have I wished for something easier? Something that didn't dirty a white mouth? And how many times have I looked for my name in gift shop keychains and walked away blank or upset or walked away wearing someone else's face? I'm gonna do two more poems and then I'm gonna open it up for the Q&A, I believe. Um, I write a lot of poems about my mother, who is the person I think I understand most in this world, and whose experience in America has been extremely isolating and lonely. And yes, so I'm just gonna read this poem that I wrote for her. All my life, I've watched my mother contemplate an exit, hovering between a conversation and a doorway. Her sleep is medicated and rich. I imagine in her dreams she is finally tall with laughter. I feel most like her son when I'm lonely, a child again, dragged by her to a party I enjoyed but then stopped enjoying, which is a cowardly way of saying I cannot kill myself until my mother dies. If joy is what tethers us to this life, then most days my mother and I float above the pavement, tied together by the fraying threads of her nightgown. All my life I've bitten at the knots of my solitude. No one wants to be alive when they are forgotten. When she is gone, who will call my name? I feel furthest from wanting to live when I think of joy as some kind of destination. A two-story house around the corner where the children play in the yard. And I guess by staying, I'm saying I want to live in this house, but I'm not. I'm saying one day I want things to be easier. Too often, I don't tell people I love, I am sad. I don't think that's something they'd want to hear because they love me. Because I don't want them to feel like the currency of their tenderness isn't enough when it has been and will be again. But if I'm being completely honest, today is hard. Today I miss people, dead and alive, far and near. I miss them all. But I should mention hope, since hope is what disarms the bomb when the city clutches their children goodnight. The red wire, blue wire optimism of my mother's voice when she says, I don't need friends, just you, and in me still a child refusing to accept the terms of her mercy. And how many times have I been told you'll understand when you're older? How many times have I heard we're all gonna die one day? That boring hopelessness, clearing the table before we eat, which is fine. Who needs a last meal? Who needs a good reason to leave the party before things get weird? So maybe that's hope. Maybe hope is stopping the story before it's over, before the inevitable messy end. O monger of the broken records, O monger of the early birthday present, push me from the highway overpass, but let's leave the story there. Let's leave the body whole in midair, illuminated by oncoming headlights, a tiny song, a pixel in the pixelated mouth of hope, or whatever it is that propels us through the door of tomorrow. And since there was no key, I guess I'll swallow the door. Thank you. This last poem I'm going to read is I wrote it for my best friend Dinez Smith, who's also a poet, and we both lived in we both lived at one point in Minneapolis, and we were both also I feel like we were going through like Mercury was in retrograde or something. Something was happening with us at the same time where we were both um, really depressed, and but we made a pact that in order to get us out of the house, we would attend a drag show once a week, and it was like the one commitment we could that would like get us out of the house that week. And so it kind of became in a way like church, like sometimes you go even if you don't want to. And also similar to church, we had to test out some nightclubs first just to see like, do we like the drag here? Do we like the drag here? And there was one place in particular that we loved the queens there, but particularly one. And her name is Monica West, and she was kind of like an auntie. She wasn't really on stage doing a lot of tricks, but she just had that energy. It was like a very nurturing energy. And one day she announced that she was moving out of Minneapolis and moving to Omaha, Nebraska. And like my heart broke. And I went home and wrote this poem called Monica West is Moving to Omaha, Nebraska. Monica West takes the stage in a dress ready to fringe fuck your conservative relatives into a bathhouse. Her wig, jet black, a dance of crow feathers, back alley, glamour sex auntie in a pair of 6-inch heels, disco ball, bastard slut in the blood moon. She snaps her fingers, and all of my dollar bills fly from my hands. My rent, my next 3 meals, all at the foot of her patent leather mercy. I don't believe in psychiatrists. That's a lie, I do. I don't believe in the church of therapy. That's another lie. But I do believe in my friends who tell me they're sad or scared but still need to get out of the house just for the night, just for tonight. I believe there's no shame in showing up to the club wearing sweatpants. I believe that at 10 p.m. every Saturday in northeast Minneapolis, a drag queen streaks a beam of light across the high points of her cheeks and transports me to a new world. Dinez and I are not amateurs. We know better. We make reservations. We show up early. We claim the good seats. Straights and rookie queers stand in the back. We tell all our friends that Vicky's got some of the best fried chicken in Minneapolis, which doesn't really mean much, considering the white folks this far north either underspice or overspice their food like they're overcompensating for history, for their ancestors' long legacy of trying to eradicate flavor from the entire fucking planet, but leave it to these queens to get it right. Spice just right, cook just right, look just right, lips, eyeliners, tights just right, but we don't come here for the food. We don't come here because the white folks are better here than they are in the real world, because after all, after last call, they will all walk into a world where their clean faces have been the destination and the path of our unmaking. Because after all, no blacks, no Asians, no spice, no rice, no fats, no femmes. They push my friends and say, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, don't see you standing there. We don't come here to fight, though we will fight. Listen, when we show up to the club, to the party, to our jobs, at our worst, know that we are always ready to be our best. Show out, show up, show the fuck up to a country that uninvites you to the parade. Show up anyways. Monica West announces she is moving to Omaha, Nebraska. And my first thought is, why? My second thought is still why. But then I think about Saturday, every Saturday, the one after the election, or the one after the shooting, or the one the night before, or the one the night of. I think about every inevitable Saturday that will follow every inevitable tragedy. I think about the world on fire and the music we choose to play anyways, and I wonder if I will ever be brave enough to leave one day. If I will one day ever get out of this town, this country, this world. If sanctuary is not a place, but the people we love all under the same impossible and temporary lights, how can I convince anyone to stay? God damn it, how do we keep people from leaving? But we didn't come here for sanctuary. We know better. We come here for Monica West, for Victoria DeVille, for Kamari Williams, for the way Kyle's ass looks tonight. We come here because I think Dinez would make a great drag queen, because I see a world where the people I love sing their favorite songs. I see a world where the crowd cheers for their brown and perfect bodies. I see a world where I stay. And I stand at the foot of the stage and wait for them to reach down and take, I don't know, my money, my hand, my fear of a world that refuses to know their glory. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hugh. That was actually a really great performance. I enjoyed it, and I know a lot of the participants or the audience here also enjoyed it. We do have some comments and questions if you're willing to answer those.
Of course.
Okay. So the first comment that we have, or the first question that we have, they started off with a comment. They wanted me to let you know that first off, that you had a fantastic presentation. They really enjoyed the poems and told you to keep up the great work. And then they followed that up with a couple of questions. The first question is, where do you write your poems? Does it vary? And the second question is, where um, is there a significance in the location which you choose to write?
Um, I so my process has kind of changed kind of throughout the years. At first, I used to write a lot in my neighborhood coffee shop, but it would take me a while to get used to the space. And so I would only be able to write in places that I get desensitized to, right? So like nothing that I am familiar with the environment, that there is nothing new that could distract me, and that I can feel at place in a space that was outside my own home. Um, but I've found that now I really like to write in my room in the dark, kind of just to also just shut out all the other sensory materials. I don't listen to music. I or if I do, it has to be like kind of noise. There's like a 12-hour video on YouTube called like space noises or something that I listen to. Um, and but my poems are always, even though it's shutting in the writing process, I'm shutting out the world. There's always trying to find a way to participate with the world, right? And so often I'll carry around a little notebook with me, and I will collect things from the world and put them in the notebook. And when I'm in my room in the dark, I will take that out and look at what I've collected and try to make sense of that collage.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Of
And I
course.
also, if I can comment on
Yeah.
your comment about how you say that you don't really listen to music, you listen to like noises. That
Yeah.
stuck out for me because I like to do different forms of art and everything, and I have friends that also like to do the same thing, and they all listen to music while they do their thing. And I'm like, no, actually, the music kind of distracts me because I start singing and like going all over the
Totally. Yeah.
place. And so I have to listen to exactly something that kind of cancels everything else out, like a noise or white noise or something.
Yeah.
So I thought
And
that was
sometimes
interesting.
sometimes with lyrics, it's like I feel like I'm trying to come up with my own words right now, and so like,
Yeah.
if Adele is in here trying to like, influence me in my brain, I have to like shut her out. Um,
Right. Your life turns into a lyric video.
yeah, can't happen.
Okay, so on to the next question. We have from Alexis, do you have a preference of poetry style, as in rhyming, free verses, etc.?
I don't have a preference for poetry style. Um, I I mean, I did at first, when I was first starting out in poetry. I started off in high school, and I was a theater kid, like a very annoying kind of theater kid, and I was immediately drawn to the performance side of poetry, and the idea that you could write something for yourself to perform, right, and that you could recite your own words and not have to memorize someone else's, right, and that your story, your poems could also be considered literature. Um, but one of the best advice I got when I was starting off is like you also have to read and read widely, not only just stuff that affirms your aesthetic and affirms what you write, but also write things that challenge you and are outside of what you know, and things that you might not like, but you have to figure out why you don't like it, right? And in order to translate that to your own work, right? If I don't like something of a poem, I have to find a way to like avoid that in my own work. And trying to challenge myself to read widely, I have learned to appreciate so many things in other people's approach to poems, ways that I don't think I could ever articulate something that way, right? But I am always mesmerized and um, by someone else's vision, or like the way someone else sees something, right? I thought I was looking at an apple this whole time, and a poet comes and tells me you haven't been looking at an apple. That's actually a hippo, right? Like there's sometimes I love that moment in a poem or in poems when the poet has somehow climbed into your head and allows you to see what they see.
And I will actually say that I think you do, just from this performance, I thought you did a really good job of that. You almost made me cry at
Oh,
one, especially because, you have this overreaching theme of childhood, your childhood, and I don't know, it just really impacted me. So I think the way that you do it is amazing, but I also see what you're saying. Like, just seeing other perspectives is just, it's too interesting to kind of just
yeah,
narrow it down into one preference. It's hard to do that with, I think, any form of art, really.
and I will also say that I love poems that can transcend any of these arbitrary boundaries we have on it, right? Whether if it's like performance or on the page, right? Like poems that are its own, that's autonomous, right? That can exist without the poet, and are so alive that reading them you can't help but feel them.
Yeah. And I even remember being in seventh grade and learning that, me barely even knowing anything about poetry now, but learning that poems like didn't have to rhyme and didn't have to follow like a linear flow. And I thought that was so beautiful about poetry and just art in general because, as someone who does enjoy art, I have heavily restricted myself, myself in these boundaries. So I think that's actually a beautiful answer. I'm sorry, I don't keep mean to
No,
keep
no,
like
no, no, no,
commenting on your comments.
no, no, no. I love. This is my only social interaction I've had all day. This is great. Um, yeah,
Okay,
I
good.
totally get what you're saying about it. It feels like you're given a chance to not only read or witness something, but you're given the chance to participate
Yeah,
in the art. Yeah,
right, exactly. And it makes in like removing these kind of constrictions around it. makes it feel very inclusive because there's no right or wrong
Yeah,
way to do it. And so you
yeah.
should just do it, and it really gives you that feeling of just do it, just get it on canvas, just get it on paper or something.
I mean, I come from, my mother doesn't speak English and my grandmother never spoke English, but they were the first poets I've ever met, right? Just the way they told stories. And I remember one of my first jobs was working as a dishwasher in one of my uncle's restaurants, and just the line cooks there would be able to just pull stories out of their mind, right? And like would be able to like keep the whole like kitchen like entranced for an entire shift, but with just stories. And so who tells us and who decides what is literature? Or who decides what is a poem, right? And language has always been a border, right? And so to take away anything that like denies access to people, right? We can expand and think about what a poem can be, right? A poem doesn't have to just be like a sonnet on a page, right? But it could be your grandmother telling you a story, or a phone call with someone you love, or text messages. I get text messages from my friends who all the time and are like, "Oh my god, this is a poem."
And that actually is going to lead into our next question because it is so it's actually a two-part question. The first one is what has your journey as a poet looked like to get from where you were to where you are now? And also any advice to aspiring writers or poets? And I know we kind of just touched on that a little bit,
Yeah.
but if there's anything missing in that answer, go ahead.
Um. So my journey has been, uh, I've described it in the past as like non-traditional, but like what is a traditional path for a poet, right? Like I think there's poets we know as like academic poets, but like even that feels new. Um, I I started writing poetry in high school, and it was like really the only thing I cared about. Um, and I was a horrible student. I like was barely there. I no one could ever nothing no subject could like keep my attention. But poetry was something that I quickly became obsessed with, and I thought I never thought that it could be, and because I found it the thing that I loved so early on, it made me not care about anything else too. And so it's kind of like chicken or the egg. Like, was I a bad student before I found poetry, or did poetry make me a bad student? I think I was just a bad student, but I I never thought of it as a potential career. I didn't know that there were poets who were full-time poets, or like what a career as a poet could look like. But I did know that poetry had enough things about it that could sustain my curiosity for a lifetime, right? And so I just wanted to. I was like okay with my first job out of high school was like delivering pizzas, right? And so I was like in my mind, I was like, I was happy delivering pizzas in the day and like writing poems at night, right? And that was like, and like throughout the day, as I was delivering pizzas, I would like write things down, and it's, and I feel, and because I didn't pursue like college, I found, I like was, I found friends and people who, community who did have knowledge of poetry that um, were generous enough to share with me what they know, and it felt like an independent study in a kind of way, right? Like in the real world, an independent study. Like this is my obsession. I'm gonna go out there and try to find everything I can about it, and the people who will be or I hope will be willing to help me, and and from there I started writing and performing poems and would compete in poetry slams a lot, and then would get opportunities to perform at different events. Um, and then and then when I felt anytime I felt like, or let me rephrase it, I never felt like I got to a point where I was tired of poetry, right? When I reached, when I thought I would reach one end of like my learning, there was a whole new pathway that I was intimidated and excited by. And so like performing poetry led to working on getting better at writing it, right? Like it on the page, and then that led to getting published. And then after getting published, I um, was able to, not because of getting published, but I applied to a master's program, even though I didn't go to undergrad, and they luckily they accepted me, and yeah, and then kind of my entire path in poetry has been trying to find um, out everything I can about poems and poetry and poets and this world that makes me curious every day.
Right. That sounds like, I mean, just the fact that you were able to get into a master's program without like doing the undergrad and everything is as a student to me, I feel like that is just incredible. You know, I think it's great. But so would you say that your advice to aspiring writers and poets would be to just write when you can and put yourself out there?
Yeah, yeah. Put yourself out there, take risks. Also, find your obsession, right? And also like it's gonna be. I want to say this is it's also okay to be obsessed with something. I think when I was first starting off, I was always writing about the same subjects, right? And then I felt so ashamed about that, right? Like I felt so much shame about wanting to keep writing about something that I already written about, and I thought that like because I already wrote about it, that I should be done with it. But the truth is that like your life's obsession is going to be with you for your whole life, right? And so it is okay to keep on writing about something as long as every time you approach it, you try to see it differently each time, right? How many times has I mean Louise Glick, who who just won the Nobel like laureate, like has been writing about flowers for forever, right? But it's more than that, right? And so to be generous with yourself and be kind to yourself in this process and of figuring out who you are and what your obsessions are. Um, yeah, I think that's my advice.
That's actually really good advice, especially being kind to yourself. That is probably I would say the best piece of advice and something that I definitely need to hear. And we just have one more question for you, and we'll let you go.
Okay.
Um, so the last question is, what poets have inspired you? And I know you said that your mom and your grandma did. And is there anyone else, or did you want to expand on that?
Yeah. Some of my one of my favorite poets early on um, is Patricia Smith, um, who's an incredible poet and performer as well. She kind of for me has like charted the path that I wanted to follow. Right? She was like would complete compete in slams, but her poems would also have a life without her needing to perform them. Right? And so she was. It felt like she had this mastery of both like the stage and the page, and she has always been a huge inspiration to me. I have a my friends my friends inspire me all the time. Um, I'll name some. Dinez Smith, who I wrote that poem for. They funny enough, we went to high school together actually, and in high school they were 2 years older than me, and I wouldn't say that we were friends, but Dinez was like because I was such a bad student, always skipping class. Dinez would like always be like yelling at me to get to class, and I but now like we like they're one of my closest friends, and their book they had a book come out last year called Homie, um, which I love, and then a book a few years ago called Don't Call Us Dead, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, yeah. So the Nesmith and Patricia Smith. I'll give you the two Smiths that
Okay.
that that rule my world.
Okay, awesome. So, Hugh, we just want to sincerely thank you from the bottom of our hearts for coming to perform for us today. We really do appreciate it. And you had such a great performance. I personally loved it. Almost made me cry. But again, we just want to say thank you so much. What a wonderful job. Everybody that came to see the performance tonight, we also want to say thank you so much to you for participating in our second Poetry Month event. If you're interested in the books of Hugh's that we mentioned earlier, they are This Way to the Sugar and Not Here. Those were just the ones that we mentioned. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention here before we
No,
left?
I think that's all. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate um for being here. And sorry I was late again. This has been. Thank you. Also, thank you for being such a great moderator.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much. I hope you
Thank
all
you
have
all.
had a wonderful evening. And no problem. Thank you. Have a
Have a
great
good
night,
night.
everybody.